Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Anna Fasan. In this segment, we're going to discuss some advanced level practice problems on linear arrays. Now we will discuss some general properties of an array. This is an array of integer values. The values are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, followed by some zeros. Usually when we have an array of integer type, we use the value 0 to denote empty slots. Now, yes, 0 is a valid value. It is still a valid integer. However, in case of integer arrays, we use 0 to denote empty slots. So the valid values in this array are 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Also, there are no empty slots between these values. So this kind of an array is called a compact array since the valid values do not have any empty slots within them. Now let's come to the length of the array. The length of an array is how many slots are available for you to store values in it. So how many slots are there in this array? In total, there are 8 slots. So this array is called, the length of this array is 8. How about the size of the array? Size of the array means how many valid values are there inside my array. Valid value means values that are not empty. Okay, so these are empty values, empty slots. These will not be counted as valid values. How many values are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hence, whenever I say size of an array, I mean how many valid values are there inside the array. So length of the array is 8 and size of the array is 5. So by seeing the length and size, I can say that there are 3 empty slots for me to put some extra values in this array. Insertion in an array. So this array is given to me and I might be asked to insert a value inside the array. So before the insertion takes place, there are some information that is needed for the insertion process to take place. The first being the array reference, means the array needs to be given to me where I will perform the insertion. After that, I also need the value that is needed to be inserted. Let's say I want to insert the value 1000. So I know that I have to insert the value 1000 in this array. I also need the information that where I want the insertion. So for this, I will be given the index. So let's say I am asked to insert a value in index 3. This means the value should be, after the insertion, the value must exist in index 3. Also, I need to be given the size of the array before I make the insertion, because we will see that using the size, I will have to find out whether the array is full or not. Because what if I am given an array that is completely filled up? In that case, insertion will not take place. So let's look at this example. I'm being asked to insert 200 in index 2. So first I should check, okay, can I do this insertion? How do I check? So do I have empty slots in this array? So you need to understand insertion does not mean replacing, because you might be tempted to do this. That since I'm being asked to insert 200 in index 2, I'll just put 200 in index 2. But this is not insertion. This is actually replacing. So insertion means if I say that I want to insert 200 in index 2, this means after the insertion, 200 should be inserted in index 2 and all these values must still exist. I cannot lose a value in the process of insertion. So this is actually the correct resulting array after the insertion has taken place. So if you see, my previous values were 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and these values still exist. So can you notice the change that has happened? If you see that since I was asked to insert at index 2, all the values after the index 2 have been shifted one place to the right to make a space in index 2. So 30, 40 and 50, they all shifted one place to the right and the value then has been inserted. This is the reason before doing the insertion, I must check whether there is empty space in my array, because if I don't have an empty space, I cannot put an extra value inside my array. Now I will simulate the array step by step to show you how the insertion is done. So again, the problem remains the same. Insert 200 in index 2. So first, I will have to shift all this value one place to the right. And if you remember, right shifting is always started from the end. So I will not first copy 30 over here, because if I do that, I'll lose 40. What I'll do is I'll first copy 50 in the next slot. After that, I'll copy 40 in the next slot. And I'll copy 30 in the next slot. I'm done. Do I need to do any more shifting? Because see, this slot has now become available for the insertion to take place, because I have shifted all the following values to its next slot. So this slot is now available for the insertion. So I'll insert the value 200 over here, and I'm done with insertion. Okay, now let's look at some validation. So whenever I am given information, I need to see whether the information is valid or not. Now, what if I'm being asked to insert 400 in index 2? So see that if I have to insert 400 here, I need to move these values in the next slot. And as I have said, since there is no empty slot, I will not be able to do this insertion. So how do we understand? How do we put a check that whether there are empty slots or not? If the size is equal to the length of the array, then there is no space for insertion. Because there are 5 slots here, also the length of the array is 5. This means the array is completely full and there is no place for insertion. Are there any other scenarios where I might not be able to insert a value inside my array? The array being completely filled up was one, but can you think of any other scenario where the information given to me might not be valid for an insertion? Let's look into these cases. So if I'm asked to insert the value 400 in index 9, you might say that, okay, there are empty spaces, so the insertion should take place. But see, is the slot 9 really available? It's not. So if I try to do the insertion in slot 9, I will get an array index out of bound exception. So this cannot take place. Also, can I insert the value in index -2? No, I can't, because an array's index cannot be negative. Also, can I insert in index 7? Well, technically, maybe I could, but usually when we do insertion, I want the array to be compact. Okay, I don't want to have empty spaces within my array. So none of these insertions should take place. Hence, I need to give a check on the index that is being passed to me, whether the index that I'm going to do the insertion in is valid or not. So can you tell me what are the valid index in this array? I may insert at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 is also a valid index for insertion, because I might need to insert a value at the end of the array. So can you come up with a check that will validate my index? So if you see, the length of this array is 8, however the size of the array is 5 and the valid index is from 0 to 5. So we can say that if my index falls in the range from 0 to size, then I can insert a value inside my array. Then the index is valid. So now let's try to write the code. This is my source array, which is equivalent to this, and I'll write a method that will take this array and insert a value in a particular index. So I want you guys to write the skeleton of the method and check whether it matches with mine. The return type is up to you, but I would suggest that you can keep the return type as Boolean. So if the insertion is successful, the method will return true, and if the insertion is not successful, then the method will return false. Okay, so this is how I have written my method. The name of my method is insert and it returns a Boolean value. Now this order might be different from yours. However, I need these 4 values for the insertion to take place. That is the reference of the array where the insertion will occur, the index for insertion, the value to be inserted, and the size. Next, do you think that we should start with the insertion code right away, or should we check for validation? Because remember, if this index value and the value of the size, and if the index value and the size value is not checked properly, then it might give a problem in your code, because index could be negative or more than my array. And what if the size of my array is equal to my length? That will mean my array is full. So I should check these values and then do the insertion. So first, let me check whether my array is full or not. Okay, so I'm going to check that if my size is equal to the length. If it is equal, then I will print no space and I'll return false. So if I return false, when I call this method inside my main method, see, I'm calling the method here. I wrote the method insert, and then I'm sending my source array, the index, the value, and the size of my array. So if I return false here, false value will be returned and it will be stored in result. So later I can print the result to show whether the insertion was complete or not. Right, so after this, I'm going to check if you need to understand that my code will come at this point or it will come to this point only if this if condition is false, because if the size is equal to the length, then it will return false and it will no longer execute the rest of the code. So if there is space in my array, that doesn't mean I will do the insertion right away. I will again have to check the index. So here I'm checking that if my index is valid or not. So I'm giving the check for the invalid index. So if my index is negative or it's greater than my size, then I'll print invalid index and I'll return false. And only when there is empty space in my array and my index is valid, only then I will do the insertion, and the insertion code will come in this part. Now pause the video at this point and try to write the insertion code on your own. Now we will focus only in the insertion method and will not be concerned about the main method anymore. So usually in data structures, you'll see that you'll be asked to only write the method that is concerned, and you don't quite need to write the main method all the time. So anyway, this is the code that we had written previously, and this is where the code for insertion will go in. Again, a little bit of review. I'm checking over here whether my array is empty or not, and whether my value of index is valid or not. Only then I will do the insertion. So after doing the insertion, this is how my array should look like. Okay, I'm inserting the value 200 in index 2. So first what we should do is, as we saw in the simulation, the last value should be moved in the next slot, because I need to remove all this, I need to shift all this value one place to its right. So for the shifting, this is where I will start. So first what we'll do is, we'll maintain a variable named I, and the variable will first point in the last index. So which one is the last index over here? Is it 7 or 4? It's actually 4, because remember, I'm not going to shift this value, okay? I'm going to shift the last valid value. So I'm going to shift this value over here. Okay, so can you come up with a small formula or a small statement that will point I towards 4? Because previously we had seen that we pointed towards the last index of an array with the statement array dot length minus 1, or in this case s dot length minus 1. But if I write I equals to s dot length minus 1, then I will be pointing towards 7, but I want I to point towards 4. So think of this array. The size of the array is 5, okay, and the last index is at 4. So size minus 1 will give me the value of the last index. So we will start the shifting process, and the value of I will be set to size minus 1, and then 50 will be shifted to the next value. So this is the code that I have written. I have set I is equals to size minus 1. I haven't written the condition yet. So 50 will move to the next position. So if I'm in my ith position, this value will move to I plus 1th value. So the value in index 4 will move to the value in index 5. So I've written I plus 1 is equals to S of I plus 1 is equals to S of I. So this will equate S of 5 is equals to S of 4. So 50 will move in the next space. In the next iteration, I will be decremented by 1, and 40 should move in the next position. Okay, so at this point, I want you guys to think of this condition and try to write it on your own, that how long should I decrement. Remember, I want to insert the value in index 2, so all the values shouldn't be shifted. So after this shifting, I will decrement one more time, and then 30 moves to the next slot. At this point, right after I have moved 30, notice that since I am supposed to insert the value 200 in index 2, now this index has become available for insertion of a value, because I have shifted all the remaining values one place to the right. So should I decrement any further? No. Once I reaches 2, I should not decrement any further. So now can you come up with the condition? How long should this loop keep on running? So this should be the condition. I is greater than or equals to index. As long as I is greater than or equals to the index, the shifting will occur. But once I has reached the index where the insertion should take place and it has transferred the value, I should not decrement any further. So this loop will then terminate. And this is only the shifting part. I still have to insert the value in the appropriate index. So after this loop, we should insert the value. So I want you guys to write this line on your own where the value will be inserted. Now that I have done my shifting, I will insert the value in index 2. So can you try to write the code over here to insert the value 200 in index 2? Remember, the value of index is stored in index, and the value to be inserted is stored in the variable named value. So the code should be S of index is equals to value. This is pretty simple. And also after I have inserted the value, at the end of my method, I should also return true because the insertion has been completed successfully. So after this line, 200 will be inserted, and I'm done. Now let's look into another problem where we have to remove a value from an array. So in order for us to remove the value, let's assume that a particular index will be given to us and we need to remove the value in that index. Suppose we're being asked to remove the value in index 2. If we just set the value to 0, then this is not a proper removal, because after removal, I have to make sure that my array is compact. So try to think on your own, how can we remove the value by making sure that my array is compact? So to make sure that my array is compact after the removal, this is how my array should look like. So you see 30 has been removed and 40 moved one place before, and 50 also moved one place before. Also, this value has been set to 0. So initially I had 5 values, and after the removal I had 4 values. So for removing, we're going to use left shift. So if you notice, if I have to remove the value in index 2, then I need to shift the remaining values one bit to the left. So 40 should move over here, and then 50 should move over here. And then we should set this value to 0. You guys try on your own to write the method that will remove a value in a particular index. So you pass this array inside the method, and after removal, this is what your array should look like. Some important points to note in case of removal and insertion. So after you remove a value from your array, the size of your array will decrease. If you remove one item, then the size will decrease by 1. Conversely, if you insert an item inside your array, if you insert one item, then your size of your array will increase by 1. So if you are maintaining the size of your array globally or inside the method, if you need the value of size later on, then after removal and insertion, make sure you update the value of the variable size.